May 19, 1962. Madison Square Garden, New York City. 15,000 people packed into the most famous arena in America. They were there to celebrate the 45th birthday of the President of the United States. But they weren't really there for the President. They were there for her. She was late. She was always late. Peter Lawford, the President's brother-in-law, the man tasked with keeping the evening running, had already introduced her 3 times. 3 times she hadn't appeared. The crowd was getting restless. The President was waiting. The cameras were rolling. And then, finally, she walked out. What happened in the next 4 minutes would be talked about for the rest of the century. She was wearing a dress. Not just any dress. A gown so extraordinary, so impossibly fitted, that costume designer Jean Louis had sewn it directly onto her body. 12,000 hand-stitched rhinestones. Flesh-colored fabric so sheer it appeared, under the lights, to be nothing at all. She looked, as one journalist wrote the next morning, like she had been poured into moonlight. The arena went silent. And then she sang. Happy birthday to you. But not the way anyone had ever heard it before. Slow. Breathy. Intimate. Like a whisper meant only for one person, delivered to 15,000 witnesses. Happy birthday, Mr. President. Each word stretched and waited. Each note placed with absolute deliberate intention. She wasn't performing for the crowd. She was performing for him. And everyone in that arena, everyone watching on television, understood exactly what they were seeing. This was not a birthday greeting. This was a declaration. John Kennedy was sitting in the front row. His wife, Jackie, was not there that night. She had declined the invitation, citing a prior commitment, a horse show in Virginia. Whether that decision was coincidence or calculation, no one has ever said definitively. Kennedy watched Marilyn perform. His face gave nothing away. Afterward, at the reception, he walked to the microphone and said, I can now retire from politics after having had Happy Birthday sung to me in such a sweet, wholesome way. The crowd laughed. Kennedy smiled. Marilyn smiled. And nobody talked about what was actually happening, at least not out loud. But here is what was actually happening. By May 1962, Marilyn Monroe and John Kennedy had been involved for years. The late-night calls. The secret meetings arranged through Peter Lawford. The information she had absorbed, unwittingly, dangerously, from conversations she was never supposed to be part of. And now she had stood in front of 15,000 people and the entire American press corps and done the one thing that powerful men in Washington had been quietly, desperately hoping she would never do. She had made it visible. Not with words. Not with a statement. With 4 minutes of music. Edgar Hoover was watching. The director of the FBI had maintained a file on Marilyn Monroe for years. He knew about the Kennedy connection. He knew about the phone calls. He knew about the diary. What he saw that night in Madison Square Garden was not a birthday performance. It was a threat. In the weeks that followed, the silence from the Kennedy camp became deafening. The calls stopped. The meetings stopped. The access, the sense that she was somehow connected to the most powerful circle in America, evaporated almost overnight. She tried to reach Kennedy directly. She was told he was unavailable. She called the White House switchboard. The operators had instructions not to put her through. She called Bobby Kennedy. Bobby answered. And what began as damage control, a younger brother sent to manage a difficult situation, became something else entirely. Something that would make everything more complicated, more dangerous, and ultimately more tragic. But let's go back to that dress for a moment. Because the dress itself is a story. Jean Louis, the designer who created it, said later that he had never made anything like it before or since. The commission had come quietly, through intermediaries. The fitting process had taken weeks. Marilyn had been involved in every detail, the cut, the placement of every rhinestone, the exact degree of translucency. This was not a woman who had stumbled into a provocative moment. This was a woman who had engineered one. She knew exactly what she was doing. She had known for weeks. The photographs from that night became some of the most reproduced images of the 20th century. The dress sold at auction in 2016 for $4.8 million, the most expensive piece of clothing ever sold at auction at that time. At the 2022 Met Gala, Kim Kardashian wore it, or tried to. The dress, now 60 years old and almost impossibly fragile, was damaged in the process. Conservators were horrified. The moment generated more controversy than almost any other fashion event of the decade. Because the dress wasn't just a dress. It never was. It was evidence. Evidence of a relationship that powerful men had tried to keep invisible. Evidence of a woman who refused, in her most public moment, to be invisible herself. 6 weeks after that performance, Marilyn Monroe was dead. The timing has never been adequately explained. The calls to Bobby Kennedy in the days before her death have never been fully accounted for. And the question that hung over Madison Square Garden that night, the question that every person in that arena felt but no one stated plainly, was never officially answered. What exactly was Marilyn Monroe saying that night? Was it a love letter? A farewell? A warning? Or was it something simpler and more devastating than any of those things? A woman who had spent her entire life being told she didn't matter, standing in the most famous arena in America, looking directly at the most powerful man in the world. And making absolutely certain that he saw her. She sang 4 minutes. She wore a dress worth a lifetime. And 6 weeks later, she was gone. Subscribe. Because next week, the marriage that broke her completely. Arthur Miller. The man who said he loved her mind. And what he actually did with it. Some betrayals are quiet. Those are the worst kind.